The rain had started before Rachel even stepped out of the hospital doors. It was the kind of steady drizzle Portland was known for, cold enough to seep through her scrubs and make her wish she had brought a thicker coat. Midnight had already passed, and the city was quiet in that eerie way it gets when most people are asleep. The parking lot stretched out before her, dimly lit by a handful of flickering lamps, each one casting long, shaky shadows across the wet pavement. Rachel pulled her hood up and hugged her bag against her side. She had worked the late shift again, 12 hours on her feet, tending to patients who seemed to multiply as the night went on. All she wanted was to get home, kick off her shoes, and let her tired body sink into the couch. But as she stepped deeper into the lot, something felt wrong. At first, it was just the echo of her own footsteps on the wet asphalt. Then she realised there was another rhythm behind hers, slower, heavier, deliberate. Her chest tightened. She kept walking, telling herself not to overthink. Maybe it was just another nurse heading to their car, maybe a patient's family member leaving late. But when she glanced around, the lot looked empty. The footsteps came closer. Rachel's pulse raced as she reached for her keys, gripping them between her fingers like some makeshift weapon. She told herself to stay calm, to breathe, but her mind kept flashing worst-case scenarios she'd seen too many times on the news. She lengthened her stride, shoes splashing against puddles, her eyes locked on her car parked under the far light. Then it happened. A rough hand caught her arm. Rachel gasped, yanking back in panic. Before she could scream, a voice cut through the rain, low, urgent, almost a whisper. "Don't stop, keep moving, don't look back." The man's face was half hidden by the shadow of a worn jacket hood. His grip was firm but not painful. His eyes weren't wild or threatening. They were sharp, scanning the lot behind her. Rachel froze, confusion battling fear. Every instinct told her to run. But something in his tone, the way his words trembled like he knew danger was close, made her hesitate. "Please," he said again, softer this time. "Just keep walking, trust me." Her breath came fast, clouding the cold night air. Somewhere behind her, faint voices broke out. A laugh, too loud, too close. She turned her head just enough to see two figures lingering near the edge of the lot, watching. And in that moment, she realised the stranger holding her arm might not be the threat at all. He might be the only reason she was still safe. Rachel's legs moved before her mind caught up. The stranger guided her forward with a steady hand, not dragging but urging. His voice was low, almost drowned out by the rain. "Cross to the lights, don't look back," he murmured. Her heart thudded against her ribs as she followed his lead. Every nerve in her body screamed to break away, but the sound of those voices behind her, closer now, sharper, kept her moving. The glow of the lampposts grew stronger as they neared the far side of the lot. When they reached the row of cars under the brighter light, the man let go of her arm and stepped back quickly, raising both hands as if to show he meant no harm. "I'm sorry," he said, his breath visible in the cold air. "I didn't mean to scare you. I saw them trailing you." Rachel turned her head slightly. At the edge of the shadows, two men were still standing, one nudging the other before slipping farther into the darkness. A chill ran down her spine. They hadn't been imagining it. They really had been following her. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice shaky. The man shifted uneasily. Up close, he looked older than she'd first thought. Maybe late 30s, early 40s. His jacket was torn at the cuff, shoes worn down unevenly, laces frayed. His face carried lines deeper than his age, the kind you only got from years of exhaustion. "Name's Daniel," he said quietly. "Used to be a firefighter. Haven't worn the uniform in a long time, though." He glanced away, almost embarrassed. "Now I mostly live out of that old truck over there." Rachel followed his nod and saw a beat-up pickup parked crooked at the far end of the lot. A blanket crumpled on the front seat. The image hit her hard. "You saved me," she whispered, still catching her breath. Daniel shook his head. "No, I didn't want you to end up like my sister." His eyes flickered with something raw, something Rachel didn't dare press on. They stood there in silence for a moment, the rain pattering on their hoods. Rachel's fear slowly shifted into something else, uneasy gratitude. He had looked like danger, but in truth he had been watching danger the whole time. She opened the bag she carried, pulling out the sandwich she had packed but never eaten during her shift. Her hands trembled slightly as she held it out. "Here, it's not much, but it's warm." Daniel blinked, taken off guard. "You don't have to." "I know, but I want to." For the first time that night, he let out a breath that almost sounded like relief. He took the sandwich gently, as if afraid it might vanish. "Thank you," he said. "Just stay safe, please. Maybe think about calling a cab next time." Rachel gave a tired smile. "I'll try." As she turned to her car, the distant echo of those men's laughter still haunted her. But when she glanced back one last time, Daniel was already walking toward his truck, shoulders hunched, a figure swallowed by rain and shadows. And though she had only known him for a few minutes, Rachel knew she wouldn't forget him. The next morning, Rachel could still hear Daniel's voice in her head. "Keep moving, don't look back." She had barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she pictured those two men lingering in the dark, and the stranger who had stepped out of nowhere. By the time she returned to work the following night, her co-workers had already noticed she was quieter than usual. During a short break, she mentioned what had happened in the lot. "You walked across the parking lot with a guy you don't even know?" her friend Lisa asked, eyebrows raised. "Rachel, that's risky." Rachel frowned. "He wasn't dangerous. He actually stopped something bad from happening." "Or maybe he just looked like he was saving you," Lisa countered. "You don't know. People like that, living in their trucks, you can't trust them. You've heard the stories." Rachel stirred her coffee without answering. A part of her knew Lisa was just worried. But another part bristled at the way she said people like that. Daniel hadn't asked for anything. He hadn't even touched the sandwich until she insisted. Later that night, as Rachel crossed the lot again, she felt the nerves return. She glanced toward the corner where Daniel's pickup had been parked, half expecting him to appear. But the spot was empty. She let out a shaky breath and told herself it was better this way. 2 nights passed without seeing him. Still, she couldn't shake the image of him standing there in the rain. His jacket worn, his voice carrying that mix of urgency and sorrow. And she couldn't ignore the thought that if he hadn't been there, her walk home might have ended very differently. On the 3rd night, Rachel paused halfway across the lot. Against her better judgment, she found herself scanning the shadows. And there he was. Daniel sat on the tailgate of his truck, eating something out of a tin can. He looked smaller without the tension of that night, almost fragile. Rachel hesitated. She could turn away, pretend not to notice. That's what most people would do. But her feet betrayed her. She walked toward him slowly, pulling a paper bag from her tote. Daniel noticed her before she spoke. His face lit up in surprise. "Didn't think I'd see you again." Rachel held out the bag. "I brought you dinner. It's not fancy, just soup and some bread." He looked at her, eyes searching for her motive. When he finally took the bag, it was with a quiet nod. "You really didn't have to." "I know," Rachel said softly, "but maybe I did." For the first time since that night, she felt the weight in her chest ease just a little. The steam from the soup curled into the cold air as Daniel ate in silence, careful and slow, as if every bite had to be savoured. Rachel stood nearby, her hands tucked into her coat pockets, unsure if she should leave him to it. Finally, Daniel set the container down and cleared his throat. "It's been a while since I had something warm that didn't come from a can, so thank you." Rachel gave a small smile. "You don't have to thank me. I just figured you deserved more than scraps." He studied her for a long moment, his eyes sharp but tired. "Most people don't see it that way. They see me, and all they want to do is cross the street." Rachel hesitated, then asked the question that had been burning since the night in the parking lot. "You said you used to be a firefighter. What happened?" Daniel let out a slow breath, looking past her toward the wet pavement. "There was a house fire. 2-story place. Family got out except for a little girl upstairs. I went in after her." His voice cracked slightly, but he pushed on. "The floor gave out before I could reach her room. I made it out, but she didn't." Rachel's chest tightened. She didn't know what to say, but the silence between them felt like permission to let him continue. "I was injured pretty bad. Back never healed right. I couldn't pass the physical anymore. And when I lost the job, I lost everything else too. Home, friends, purpose." His jaw clenched as he looked down at his hands. "I started drinking. Told myself it helped me forget. Really, it just made people forget me." The honesty in his words hit Rachel harder than she expected. It wasn't rehearsed. Not polished like a story told to strangers. It was raw, messy and real. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Daniel shook his head. "Don't be. I made my choices, still making them every day, just trying to do better than yesterday." The rain picked up, tapping on the roof of his truck. Rachel pulled her coat tighter but didn't move. She thought about Lisa's warning, about how people only saw the surface. What she saw sitting on that tailgate wasn't just a man who'd lost his way. It was someone carrying a weight that hadn't been his to carry alone. "You don't owe me your story," Rachel said softly, "but I'm glad you shared it." Daniel gave a faint smile, one corner of his mouth twitching upward. "Guess it's easier when someone finally asks, instead of looking the other way." For the first time since that night in the parking lot, Rachel felt a fragile thread of trust stretch between them, and she knew she wasn't going to let it snap so easily. The first time Rachel saw him stumble, it broke something inside her. She had just stepped out of the hospital when she heard the shouting. Daniel's voice carried across the street, loud, angry, the slur unmistakable. An empty bottle clinked against the curb as he shoved past another man. Rachel froze, her chest tightening. The man who had pulled her from danger, the one who had spoken with such quiet strength, now looked like every warning Lisa had ever thrown at her. His eyes, glassy and unfocused, landed on her for just a second. Shame flickered across his face before he turned and staggered toward his truck. Rachel drove home without a word, but her mind screamed the whole way. She had defended him, she had believed in him, and in one night it all felt like it was slipping. For 2 days she avoided the far end of the lot. She told herself it was safer. She told herself she was done being foolish. Yet every time she tried to push Daniel from her thoughts, the memory of his voice, the urgency, the honesty, the pain, kept creeping back. People didn't fall apart overnight, and they didn't fix overnight either. On the third night, she found herself standing by his truck again, rain soaking into her coat. Daniel sat on the tailgate, a bruise shadowing his cheek, his hands clasped so tight his knuckles were white. He didn't look up right away. "I messed up," he said finally, his voice low and steady. "I swore I was done with it, but I slipped. I know I scared you, and if you don't come back after tonight, I'll understand." Rachel's throat tightened. Part of her wanted to turn and walk away, but she stayed. "You want me to believe you won't do it again?" she asked carefully. He let out a humorless laugh. "I can't promise that. Not yet. All I can say is I'm trying harder than I did yesterday. And tomorrow I'll try harder than today. It's all I've got." The silence between them stretched. Rain tapped against the metal of the truck, steady and unrelenting. Finally, Rachel took a step closer, her voice softer. "I'm not here because it's easy to believe you. I'm here because I want to see if you can prove me wrong." Daniel lifted his head slowly, eyes wet but clearer than she'd seen in days. "Then I will. I swear to you, I will." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. It was a line drawn, a fragile chance. And for Daniel, that was more grace than he had expected. By the end of the week, Rachel showed up at the lot carrying a folder, the edges worn from her shift bag. She placed it beside Daniel on the tailgate of his truck. "What's this?" he asked, wary. "Hope," Rachel said simply. She opened the folder and spread out applications she'd circled in red ink. Security positions, warehouse jobs, maintenance work, and on top a draft of a resume she had typed up. Daniel stared at it like it was written in another language. "You really think anyone's going to hire me? No address, no recent history, a record that screams failure." Rachel didn't flinch. "I'm signing up for night classes next month. I'll be the oldest one in the room, exhausted after 12-hour shifts, broke from tuition. And you know what? I'm still doing it. Because if I don't believe in myself, no one will. If I expect people to give me a chance, I have to give you one too." Her words settled between them. For a moment, Daniel said nothing. Then he let out a shaky laugh. "You always know how to corner a guy." "No," Rachel corrected gently. "I just refuse to let you quit on yourself." Over the next days, they worked together. Rachel filled in the clean lines of his resume. Former firefighter, emergency response, community service. She left out the drinking, the nights in the truck. He signed form after form, his hand trembling as though each signature carried the weight of a verdict. The first interview came from a small security company. Daniel showed up in a thrift store button-down Rachel had ironed for him, his hair trimmed short. When he came back that evening, Rachel met him in the lot. "They said no," he muttered, dropping the rejection slip onto the metal of the truck bed. "Too long out of work, no stable address. Didn't even matter that I risked my life for this city once. Another week, another rejection." This time a warehouse manager eyed his worn shoes and shook his head before Daniel could even finish his pitch. Rachel saw the defeat in his eyes growing heavier with each no. One evening he didn't even look at the folder she handed him, he just stared at the ground. "Maybe Lisa was right about me," he said quietly. "Maybe I'm just someone people should avoid." Rachel knelt down, forcing him to meet her gaze. "No. You're someone who's been knocked down more times than most. That doesn't make you worthless. It makes you a fighter." He shook his head. "And if I fail again?" "Then you fail," she said firmly. "And we try again. Because every rejection gets you closer to the one yes that matters." For the first time that night, his shoulders eased, just slightly. He picked up the folder again, brushing his thumb across the neat rows of paper. "All right," he whispered. "One more shot." Months slipped by. The kind that blurred together with rain-soaked nights and endless no's. Rachel pressed on with her classes at the community college, juggling textbooks with night shifts. Daniel pressed on too, though each rejection chipped away at him. Still, he kept showing up at that tailgate, folder in hand, because Rachel refused to let him stop. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, Rachel's phone rang while she was grabbing coffee before her shift. The voice on the other end was deep and direct. "This Daniel Walker listed you as a reference. You're a nurse at St. Vincent's, right?" Rachel tightened her grip on the cup. "Yes, that's right." "You trust him?" the man asked bluntly. Without hesitation, Rachel answered, "With my life. He saved me once. He hasn't stopped trying since." There was a pause, then the man chuckled. "Good enough for me. Tell him the warehouse on 5th Street needs a night guard. If he can be here tomorrow, the job's his." That night, Rachel nearly ran across the lot to Daniel's truck. He was hunched over, staring at the same worn rejection slips he never threw away. "You got a call today," she said, breathless. Daniel didn't even look up. "Another rejection?" Rachel shook her head, smiling through tears she hadn't realised had gathered. "No, a yes. They want you at the warehouse, starting tomorrow." For a long second, he just stared at her, as if the words couldn't sink in. Then he pressed his palms to his face and laughed, rough and broken, the sound more like a sob. "You're serious?" "I'm serious," Rachel said. "You did it." The next evening, Daniel arrived in a thrift store button-down Rachel had ironed and a pair of jeans that actually fit. He looked nervous, like a man walking into a new life on shaking legs. The warehouse manager, a broad-shouldered vet with silver hair, gripped his hand firmly. "You served this city once," the man said. "I know what it's like to lose everything. Don't waste this chance." "I won't," Daniel replied, voice steady for the first time in years. At dawn, when his shift ended, Rachel was waiting with 2 steaming cups of coffee. Daniel walked out with a badge clipped to his shirt and a tired but unstoppable smile. "I didn't just work tonight," he said, his voice breaking, "for the first time in years. I belonged." Rachel handed him the coffee and whispered, "That's just the beginning." Word spread faster than Rachel expected. A few weeks after Daniel started at the warehouse, she was sitting in the hospital cafeteria when 2 co-workers slid into the booth across from her. "Hey," one of them said casually, though the look in her eyes was anything but friendly. "We saw you out there the other night, with that guy, the one living out of his truck." Rachel set her fork down slowly. "His name is Daniel, and he's not living in his truck anymore. He has a job now." The other nurse gave a skeptical laugh. "Still, you really think it's smart? I mean, he's... people like that, they don't just change overnight." Rachel clenched her jaw. She wanted to argue, to shout that they were wrong, but their words sank deeper than she wanted to admit. On her way to the lot that night, she found herself scanning Daniel more closely. His uniform neat, his face freshly shaved, his smile tired but proud. He looked steady, grounded. Yet doubt whispered in the back of her mind. Daniel caught it. He always did. "They're talking about me, aren't they?" Rachel hesitated. "Some people don't understand. They think I'm taking a risk." He let out a slow sigh, his breath misting in the cool air. They're not wrong. I've been a risk most of my life. I've let people down, scared them off. I don't blame them for thinking it'll happen again. But you're not that man anymore, Rachel insisted. Daniel studied her face, as if trying to measure how much she believed her own words. You sure about that? Because if you start listening to them, if you start doubting me... His voice cracked. I don't think I could survive losing that. Rachel swallowed hard. For the first time since they met, she realised this wasn't just about food or friendship or safety in a dark parking lot. She had become his lifeline, the one thread pulling him toward the world again. And if she cut it, he might never climb back. That night, as he walked her to her car, she slipped a folded note into his hand. Read it later, she said. When he opened it hours later, sitting alone in his small rented room, the words were simple. I believe in you, even when others don't. Daniel pressed the note against his chest, eyes stinging. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel like the world was laughing behind his back. He felt like he had someone in his corner. Winter crept in slowly, the kind of cold that seeps into bones no matter how many layers you wear. Rachel had signed up for night classes at the community college, determined to work toward a degree in healthcare management. Daniel insisted on driving her when he could, saying it gave him peace of mind, knowing she wasn't walking across dark lots alone. One night after class let out, the two of them climbed into Daniel's old pickup. The engine coughed twice, sputtered, then died with a wheeze. Daniel smacked the steering wheel, muttering under his breath. He tried again. Nothing but silence. Rachel shivered, rubbing her arms. Maybe we should just call a cab. No, Daniel snapped, fumbling with the keys again. I can fix it. She studied him in the dim glow of the dashboard. His jaw was tight, shoulders hunched like the weight of the world had just dropped on him again. It's just a truck, Daniel, she said softly. It's not just a truck, he shot back, louder this time. It's my proof, my job, my place, everything I've clawed back. It starts and ends with me being able to show up. And if I can't even keep this piece of junk running, then what am I? The words stung. For a moment, Rachel saw the old shadows flicker in his eyes. The shame, the anger, the fear of slipping backward. She turned toward the window, hurt by the edge in his voice. They sat in silence, breath fogging up the glass. Finally, Daniel pushed the door open and stepped into the freezing night. Rachel watched him lean under the hood, his hands bare, fumbling with stubborn bolts. Rain began to fall again, steady and cold. Her instinct was to stay in the cab, to let him fight with it alone. But then she saw the way his hands shook, not from the cold, but from the desperation clawing at him. She grabbed an umbrella from the back seat and stepped out, holding it above him. You don't have to fix everything tonight, she said gently. You just have to keep showing up. That's all anyone can ask. Daniel looked up, water dripping from his hair, his face etched with exhaustion. For a moment, his defences crumbled. He leaned against the hood, wiping at his eyes with the back of his hand. I'm sorry, he whispered. I didn't mean to snap. I don't ever want to go back to being the man I was. Rachel steadied the umbrella over both of them. Then don't. You're not him anymore, and you don't have to carry this alone. In the middle of that empty lot, with the rain falling and the old truck silent, Daniel finally let himself believe her. The fight between them melted into something quieter, something that felt like family. 2 years later, the gymnasium of the community college buzzed with families and flashing cameras. Rows of folding chairs creaked under proud parents and siblings. Rachel stood with the other graduates, cap slightly crooked, diploma folder clutched to her chest. She searched the crowd, no mother, no father, no family waving from the front row. For a moment, she felt the same ache she had carried since childhood, the ache of being unseen. But then her eyes found him. Daniel stood near the aisle, shoulders squared, wearing a pressed shirt and the old firefighter's jacket draped neatly over one arm. His hair was trimmed short now, his face lined but steady. He looked nothing like the man she had met in a rain-soaked parking lot. He looked like someone who belonged. When Rachel's name was called, she walked across the stage, her pulse racing. She heard it then. Daniel's clap, loud and sure, rising above the polite applause of strangers. A few heads turned, curious. Some eyes narrowed, whispering to each other. Rachel caught it, the flicker of judgment. Why is he here? Who is he to her? But Daniel didn't shrink. He stood taller, clapping harder, pride blazing across his face. After the ceremony, the announcer asked if anyone wanted to acknowledge the people who had supported the graduates. Families rose, cheering names, waving signs. Rachel's heart pounded as she turned and pointed straight at him. "That's him," she said, her voice catching. "That's my family." The crowd fell quieter, eyes following her finger. Daniel hesitated only a second before stepping forward. His voice rang out, rough but steady. "I'm not her father by blood, but tonight I stand for her. Because family isn't just who raises you, it's who refuses to leave you in the dark." Silence swept the room before the applause began. Stronger, warmer, deeper. Rachel's eyes filled with tears as Daniel wrapped her in his arms, a bouquet of supermarket flowers crumpled between them. "You saved me that night," she whispered. Daniel shook his head gently. "No, Rachel, you saved me. You gave me back a reason to stand." They stood together under the string lights outside the gym, the night cool and calm. And in that moment, Rachel knew the truth she would carry forever. Sometimes the family you choose is the one that saves you most of all. True family is not always the one you're born into, but the people who stand beside you when everyone else turns away. Kindness has the power to not only save others, but to rebuild broken lives, including your own. Thank you for staying with us until the very end of this story. I'm truly grateful for your time and support. If you enjoyed it, please remember to like this video and subscribe to Rain Inside for more stories that touch the heart. I'll see you again in the next one.